Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to Revelations with Rowena. I assure you, I say this every week, and I feel like y'all are probably like, she's lying now. There is an intro audio video ness coming soon, but as you know, the struggle is real for us small business owners trying to make things happen. So it's on its way. I assure you. And in case you notice, I am in a different space. Usually, I'm in my basement that was renovated during COVID times, because I'm sure a lot of folks can agree that by looking at our houses for a year and a half, we're like, I want to change this thing. So I've been doing the show from my basement setup with my ring light and everything. But I was telling Cady this before we got started. When I went down earlier to put something else away in the basement, there was a humongous spider friend that was hanging out and saying hi, and I did not want to be its friend. And so for you guys, so I didn't want to have a spider jump on me in the middle of this interview. I decided to hang out in my upstairs office space. So welcome. The cats are shut out of the room, so you won't get a chance to see them today. But anyway, I digress. I am so excited to have a fabulous guest with us today. Cady Milley. She is a bookkeeper for creatives, and which I'm sure you know is very near and dear to my heart as a fellow creative. And she's going to talk to us today about how we can turn our passions into a profitable business. Because I know for a lot of us out there, we that's like the holy grail end goal, right? Being able to do something that we love every single day. Well, Cady's here to talk to us about her journey and how she's able to help other folks, other entrepreneurs get there through this work that she's doing. So, Cady, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited as well. So, we usually start off by having you tell us a little bit about your journey. What motivated you to get into this business, and ultimately what motivated you to work with creatives in particular?
Well, so starting out in my career, I loved organizing things. I really liked organizing things so much that I actually thought I would be a secretary. I thought that was actually what was going to be my career at first in high school. And then as I got into college, I was like, oh, I want to do business management. I think I want to be a manager. I want to manage people. I want to manage a company, which I ended up doing later on. But when I got into college, one of the things I was really skilled in was math. And so because of that, I had a accounting student in one of my first gen ed math classes, and she said, "Okay, well, if you're good at math, study accounting because with an accounting degree, you can do business management, but you cannot necessarily do accounting with a business management degree." And I was like, "Well, that's smart." And so that's how I began studying this. And then I also I worked as a manager in retail. I worked as a bookkeeper for various companies. I never have worked for a big company ever, surprisingly. I'd worked for a lot of small startups, and that's what developed my passion for working with small businesses. And then
Mm.
as that went along, I worked with so many different small businesses. I was like, I need to make a career doing this, not trying to stick with one company, but working with many.
Mm.
And so I learned to find some different courses online on how to run your own business, on how to run an accounting business. So not only more accounting knowledge, but also management knowledge, that type of thing. The creative side took a while to develop. But growing up, I had so many friends that were creatives. I had friends that liked to dance, who like to act, who I have one that now does. He makes comics. He
Oh, that's so fun.
and so and he is one of my inspirations. And I loved all those things. And my sister is the polar opposite of me, because I'm very very serious, very detail organized, very focused on numbers and management. But she, on the other hand, could do like any creative skill you could think of. She did acting. She liked baking and decorating cakes. She's now a massage therapist, is what she grew up to be. And I tried all of those things. Like, I wanted to sing, I wanted to act, I wanted to draw, and I had no skills whatsoever. Like, it's an actual challenge, and it's really funny because a lot of my creatives don't have the patience to sit down and work on their numbers and bookkeeping. I don't have the patience to sit down and learn like an art. Like, I get really distracted. And so I became an enthusiast of creatives because I loved what they did. It seemed impossible for me, which makes them seem all that much cooler to me. And I wanted to make sure that there were more of them and that they were thriving. And then creatives are also making like these cool and different businesses, because like the other passion of mine is like entertainment, creativity, and just geeky stuff. Like, the more geeky stuff around, the more I'm really, really happy. I live in Florida now, and Orlando has several nerdy spots that are themed, nerd bars, video game bars, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I want to be everywhere.
I love it. Wow. Thank you. That was a beautiful story in terms of, first of all, you know, how you had this management organizational skill set very early on, mentioning that you thought you were going to be a secretary. And listen, though, I mean, admins, you got to be best friends with our admin friends out there, right? Because I know in organizations that I've worked at, you make best friends with the admin because they will hook you up. So I love how you moved from there, and then you had this you had a good friend, which I feel like there's always a good friend in my own story as well. There's always like a good friend or a classmate or someone that sees something that you're not necessarily privy to, right? Like, oh, you should try this XYZ thing. And you're like, oh, okay. So then you try it, and then you realize that you're good at it. And listen, us creatives need the enthusiasts, right? Because if we're going to make a living out of this, we need an audience. We need folks that are going to sponsor our work or be patrons of our art, of our creations. So I think it's just lovely that you tried it for yourself. You're like, oh no, I'm not good at this, but I love and admire creatives so much that I'm going to build a business that's going to support them as best as possible. I think that's just an amazing self-awareness, right? Because listen, we've all seen those American Idol episodes, right? Where there's the singer or someone that's on there being like off key and whatnot, thinking that they're the greatest. I think it takes a lot of self-awareness and the humility to be like, okay, maybe I'm not meant to be a performer, an artist in this regard, but I'm really good at this other thing. So let me support the cause. And of course, we've talked about this in other settings. We're all here for the geeky, nerdy, nerdy things. I love that. So just a beautiful story and a reminder, friends, that if there's something you're interested in and it may not come to you easily in one particular skill set, think of ways that you can still support that cause with the skill sets that you already have. So tell us a little bit about your business, Pegasus Bookkeeping. What does that entail? You know, you mentioned that usually creatives are not into the numbers and the finances. So how do you support creatives in that regard?
So even though they may not like sitting down and doing the numbers, it's extremely important. So some of the common things that I have to work with creatives on is, number one is pricing. Because I find creatives underprice themselves so much, and it makes me so sad. Because they spend so much time and so much effort on a project, and then they're like, oh, it's $5. And I'm like, why would it be that low? And it would simply because that's what I think people would pay. and they price based on the opinions of whoever they may have asked. They may have asked like a couple people. I actually saw this on a Etsy group. Somebody made a post on an Etsy group on Facebook and said, "What would you all pay for this product?" And I was like, no. That's not at all how you price. And the thing that's really, really important, I think, for every creator to know is you are going to have a niche. There is going to be a very specific type of person who very specifically likes your brand of art. Your art is not going to appeal to everyone. That's not really common. Like when I do an Etsy search, I'm looking for something very specific because like I'm trying to make all these nerdy themed rooms. And so I've been looking for like medieval art. And so there was someone who specialized in just making elves in medieval art. And that
Love
was
it.
Etsy shop. When people are looking for you, they're looking for something specific. They have some type of art in their head and they want to see that you can create it, or they want a custom piece that no one else has. And so when you're deciding what to make and how you want to price, there are artists who only make a couple pieces a year. They're very detailed paintings, very complex, and like $13,000. Like obviously you're not going to sell a lot of those, but there is going to be one very particular person on a very particular budget that's going to want that piece. And then there are other artists who create they have a specialty, so that people like me who have something that they're looking for can find them. And then to make it cheaper, they may make the art piece once and then make prints.
Right.
And because that's how you can make it cheaper, is making one piece of art but making prints. But if they want the original, they need to pay for it. So that's something I work. So I also kind of work with mindset as well as that, because it's so important that creatives have the mindset of a business owner. What is your strategy? What is your pricing? And then when we're talking about pricing, like how much time did this take you? How much materials that you're using? Because you have to at least cover costs. And then after that, it's like I was saying earlier, how many pieces can you make? How many are you going to do prints? Are you going to do originals? What is your target market? Like, are you looking for like the nerdy type people? Are you looking for, is it an eclectic style? And you have to market to those specific people. So you have to really think about what you're doing.
Oh my goodness, I love that. The pricing thing is so true. And I've talked about that with my own clients who are creatives, right? We oftentimes take for granted how quickly we can turn things out. And then as a result of that, we're underpricing our services or our, our art or what we're offering, because we're like, oh, well, it didn't take that much time. Yeah, but people are paying for that time or that the if they try to do it themselves, it would take how much longer. So we're paying for that, the fact that you have this expertise and that you put this time and this skill into whatever you're creating. And as a marketer, putting on my marketing hat, yeah, from a search engine optimization perspective, people might be searching for something very specific. So keeping that in mind and knowing what your niche is and who you're targeting, who you're selling with the creations that you're doing, I think is very important. But what about for folks, as you mentioned, that you've worked with that are creating more of like entertainment or experiences, or something that you can't sell on Etsy, for example? Is it a similar sort of mindset in terms of pricing and how to figure out how much your worth is and your value?
Well, so when I think of entertainment, the first thing I think of is like Twitch and YouTube. That I love that. I grew up watching that type of content. Like I watched like PewDiePie and Jacksepticeye and like Smosh, and so I really liked comedy and skits and gaming. The way that they are paid is entirely different. They don't say like, oh, I get paid this hourly rate. It's a different issue altogether, because they have advertising, but they do
Right.
merch. So in some cases, yes, you still have to set the price based on how much did the merch cost, how much will it cost to sell, and also what will people pay for it. Because like if you look at some of the like recently, Markiplier is a good example of like a public figure. He would sometimes release signed merch.
Oh, yeah.
Only release a limited amount of that merch. And so that merch was way more expensive than all of the other stuff because there was only a limited quantity because you only had so much time to sign these things. And it also made them worth more because they were limited. And so collectors want that. And so you have to think about that. And you also have to think about your branding. What kind of advertisers are you going to work with? You have to be very careful about making sure you're advertiser friendly. And you have to make sure that you choose advertisers that aren't going to negatively affect your brand. Because if you choose like an unreputable company, because it works both ways, they don't want you hurting their brand, and you don't want them hurting your brand if you accidentally represent a non-reputable company. And so in some regards, you still have to think like a business owner, even if you're not pricing by the hour or by the service. And then you still have to make other decisions like how many videos can I make? There's people to hire, like there's editors, things like that. And so you have to think about how are you going to pay them? There's a lot on the back end and the front end. And I feel like it's really not appreciated enough. It's not, oh, I make a video and I post it. And the same thing, like when you're talking about musicians stuff, there's so much work that goes into practicing and honing their skills and writing their songs and that kind of stuff. And so you still have to strategize. And so like what venues are you going to play out? How often can you do that? What is, because there is a talk about like what is reasonable between in order so that you can be able, like if you overprice, you won't be able to book as many as many gigs.
Yeah.
Like I can keep going on and on.
No. I think these are all great examples, Cady, about that you got to find that sweet spot, right? You got to find that sweet spot of like, okay, we need to get paid, but we got to be paid at a point where we're not spreading ourselves so thin because we're going from gig to gig to gig, or, creating piece after piece after piece and burning ourselves out, or it's just not feasible. And I love you stressing the importance of the back end, because again, I think we see the end product, right? We see the person on Twitch, or we see the beautiful music video or whatever. And oftentimes we don't necessarily take a step back and think, oh, I wonder, who were all the players that made this end beautiful deliverable or this piece of work happen? There's a lot that goes into that. And with that, there are a lot of expenses that go into that. So do you, in terms of the strategy that you're mentioning, right? Because you have to figure out, okay, as you mentioned, how many gigs or how many pieces, how many prints am I going to make? Is this something that you do year to year, month to month? Is it a quarterly conversation? How often do you touch base with the folks that you work with?
So it is very customized. And so it could, once a year, that is not a great idea just because so much can happen within a year. So at minimum, it's quarterly. And quarterly would be if not a lot of things change in your business. Like everything is pretty much the same thing over and over again. Sometimes with service businesses, it can be like that. But when you're selling a product or something like that, there's a lot of stuff that changes. Because even like the value of the items that you're buying, the materials to create your product could change like week to week. And so that's the kind of thing you have to constantly keep an eye on. And the strategy also varies from client to client, because each client could have a different issue, because pricing may be their biggest issue. They may be paying too much for materials. They may have so like when you're doing video production, that's a long-term project. And especially if you're doing it for like other people, and so you have a totally different project each time. You have to check to make sure that is still being profitable, or is the project running too long, and so therefore it was profitable but now it isn't because you have to pay more in hours for the people working on it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting, and I mean, gosh, this year and a half alone is evidence that you never know what's gonna happen, and things are definitely going to be changing up, and so staying on top of that is really important. So, what are some of the so do you have your clients come to you with, "Okay, here are my plans, and here is my current pricing," and do you talk through what they're thinking, or do you meet halfway? What is that process like? Or what if it's someone that's like, I have no idea, Katie, guide me. What does that look like? You said it's customizable, but is there something that you do with all of your clients maybe that runs across them depending on whatever field they're in or area that they work in?
So the before I start working with anyone, I
Hmm.
have them talk to me about their business, and I ask more questions, and I try to get every little detail, even the little details you don't think that's matter, like how do you get paid? How
Mm,
what is your current strategy? What is your long-term strategy? What are you focused on? Because I have creatives that really don't want to make it a full-time business. They just do it on the side. They have totally different goals than someone who wants
gotcha.
to make a big company. And so that's the first thing. And honestly, accounting is the language of business. And so the more you talk to me about your business,
Mm,
I will understand in the background, here's the money side of that. Because
mm,
even if someone tells me a goal like, I want to retire in 10 years, very vague, nothing to it. But then in my head, I do the translation of like, okay, how much do you need to retire?
yeah.
How much do you need to be making personally, which tells me what profit your business needs to be making. And then everything else we do is going to lead to that goal. And
Mm,
so, what I look first and foremost is what is your goal? And then we break it down and figure out the steps to get there. And we also figure out, because everybody has different problem areas, is what is the problems that are keeping you from getting there. What would be the same? The strategy is usually not the same,
okay.
especially because there's so many different industries. And again, one person may be really good at one type of thing, but not
Mhm.
good at another type of thing. But when it comes to accounting itself, is the same thing over and over.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
what I am doing most of the time when I'm not doing the once a month, once a quarter advising is building a budget, or most importantly, recording all the transactions that you had in the year and putting them into categories. How much did you spend on
Mhm.
advertising? How much did you spend on materials? How much did you spend on random meals while you were going out? How much did you spend on hires? And so that is generally the same because it's the same accounting rules in each case. And that part is the most boring part that nobody really wants to get into. The
Yeah.
fun part is when I turn that into a financial statement and say, okay, I can show you what all your debts are. I can show you how much you spent. I can show you, and then from there, we can keep checking in each quarter, like, how did that change? Did we improve?
Mm,
Did it get worse? And so a lot of the times I am using these numbers and asking creatives to say what happened. And I'm making them think about it and think about how are they going to change that for the next quarter
mhm.
to make it better? How are they going to change that for the next month? But I take care of like the really nitty gritty stuff, the boring stuff.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like nitty-gritty. So you mentioned debt, and you mentioned that you've worked with a lot of small business owners, and I know for folks that are starting out, it can be a daunting process, right? To figure out how to generate that revenue stream. What are some ways that, you mentioned that you talked to some clients and say, "What happened?" So if after that, "What happened?" and you talk about what happened, do you have any tips or strategies on how to change it so that there's not another session of what happened here, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So it's so hard to come up with like one example because there's so many different
Mm,
what
yeah.
one strategy that I find is commonly overlooked, or well, I'm lacking the words for it, but we could talk. They over diversify. They don't pick one thing
Yeah.
to be really good at. For example, so one of the most common clients I get is videographers and photographers.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be generalists. So they do weddings and family and corporate and whatever else that they would just anything that would need video or photography. And I find that that doesn't end up being very profitable because each
Mm,
of those things require different materials. They require
yeah.
more time, that kind of thing. And so focusing on one area or providing one service. So the most important thing is to reduce your services.
Gotcha.
And that's the same thing. If you offer products, don't offer a million products. It's better to offer
Mm,
20 really, really good products than have like 100 kind of meh.
yeah.
And every shop has like the thing that they're best at, the thing that they sell the most, and that's exactly the type of thing that you're supposed to hone in on. And things that kind of sell a little bit, and things you just like to offer so that you have more diversity, toss it.
That's
Because
really good advice. Yeah.
that really helps to make it more so. Like, some of the best photographers I see are ones that specialize. There's a photographer, I cannot remember her name, but she does mermaid sessions. It is a
Oh,
very,
awesome.
and everybody knows about her in the area because, like, even though I don't know her name, I know what she does because I've seen her pictures on social media. And she puts all she needs is different C type backgrounds. So she only has to focus on one kind of background.
Yeah, that's
And to
true.
create, and she makes sure she has like mermaid props and mermaid tails, and she'll put little girls in these mermaid tails, and that's her mermaid sessions. And so that's why it's so great to focus on one thing, because she only had to buy one type of material. Now, if she was doing all kinds of different things, she'll need 20, 30 other different backgrounds, because maybe it's a newborn session, or maybe they want a different background or a different color, or maybe it's a professional headshot where they don't really want a background. And then that's a lot of materials you have to buy.
Yeah, no, and no worries. If you come up or if you find the information for that photographer, you can just let me know and I can put it in the comments or what have you. So, yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So we're talking about here, the title for this is turning your passion, right? So, what if you're someone like me that has like a million bajillion passions? Like, how do you and I again, I love your story, how you took like, okay, I like this thing, but I'm not really great at it. I enjoy, singing and nerdy stuff and creating these things. But let me take this thing that I'm really good at and integrate it into this business. What do you have thoughts on how to figure out what that zone of genius, what that, ultimate passion that can become a profitable business could end up being?
Part of it is a journey in and of itself. I wouldn't say there's a
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's a quick answer to that question, because even when I think of like my own, I had to fail at a lot of different things in order to find out what I'm good at. And
Mm,
then when I found what I'm good at, that was still had to be honed. So like,
yeah,
one of my specialties now is teaching. I like to educate.
love
Um,
it.
and that is continuously being honed, because the more I learn and the more businesses I work with, the better that advising and teaching gets. Um,
Mhm.
but and then like I also find my sister was one of those creators that floated from thing to thing, and she was kind of good at everything. I still don't understand it myself, but then further than that, so you have to think about, what do I absolutely hate doing over and over again? That's probably,
Mm,
I like to do that once in a while, take that to the side. The other thing is, and it gets trickier because it's also about, what do other people tell you? And that is a fine line that is very tricky to walk, because
ooh, what do you mean by that? In terms of, like, what other people tell you you're good at?
yeah, because you
Ah,
can't
yeah.
rely entirely on that. But when you're like providing different things, like my sister decorated cakes for a while. And she actually was able to make cakes for other people, and other people wanted her cakes. And so that's one of those signs. But obviously, if you have people telling you, even if you just have a couple people telling you that, you also don't want to think about that too much. And then the one person that goes, your cakes are ugly, obviously that doesn't mean you're not good at making cakes. Like if absolutely every single person says that's a weird looking cake,
I'm sure her cakes are lovely. I'm sure her cakes are not weird.
That's also the trouble with creatives in general, because you see so many good creatives that were told your stuff makes no sense, like very early on. And so that's why it's really hard. So more than anything, it's take the time to hone it. Actually take the steps to make it into your business and see what happens. Because to be honest, that's like the best advice I have there. Because so it's things that people think doesn't make sense might make sense down the road. Like you may have this really strange piece that you think nobody likes, and then somebody's like, that's worth $13,000.
Yeah.
So but what I would say is the most important thing is a lot of people have this passion, and creatives in general like focus on the artistic value. Like I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. They want to make what they want to make. And so
right. It's the art for art's sake. Yeah, it's not the why is different.
And that's the most pure thing that I love, but it's also something to keep in mind that kind of whatever will be the making like whatever you like, that kind of thing. As a business model, that doesn't necessarily work. As a hobby, that works, but as a business, you have to actually analyze, like put things out on Instagram. What do people like and what do people not seem to like as much? You can figure out what you want to market. Figure out, okay, these type of people like this, because that's the other side of it. Because maybe this type of people hates my work, but this type of people loves my work. So then you have to focus all your efforts on the latter part. And so figuring out how those people are to be marketed to, what are going to be your marketing methods, that kind of thing. And so you have to think really strategically. That also, it's really interesting to listen to creatives in that regard, because it can also make you stuck doing one thing over and over. And I think that's the one thing about business is you definitely have this one type of thing, or like this one type of style. And sometimes that is the one that you have to focus on, or you have to focus on making custom things for people or custom requests and that kind of thing.
Right, like commissions.
Those are the most profitable ways to do it. So that the one thing about running a business is I feel like it does compromise the artistic expression a bit. So that's kind of the things to weigh. And so if you want to make sure you can make whatever you like all the time, that's kind of the thing where I've heard this said before of, if you want it to continue to be fun and something that you love, don't make it your business. So you have so much more freedom when you do that. And that's also why you can also choose to have it as a hobby. And so that's why hobby and business has totally different mindsets. And so a lot of people actually have like a side business that it's not their main focus, but they create what they like, and they sell it. And it's not like, I won't have groceries or rent if I don't sell this thing, but I enjoy making it. And so it's really up to the individual person of what their values are to decide, like, do I want to make this into my business, or do I really want to keep it as a hobby? And so that you don't have to worry about, do people like this? Are people going to buy this? How much are people going to be paying for it? Because there is a lot of stress in that regard.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. Gosh, you just threw out so many good nuggets, some gems there in terms of mindset going into this, in terms of, marketing principles and things that you have to think about when it comes to figuring out which passion or which, which thing that you like is going to filter into a business. I know I mean, in my own experience, right? That's me in theater for a hot second. I was thinking, oh, let me audition for bigger things, and I found myself being like, no, no, no. At one point I thought I was going to go to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and I was like, no, no, you know what? I really enjoy just doing this as my hobby, as a passion project, and I love the community theater groups in the DMV area. It's been really fun to just do something for me without that added pressure of, oh, I need to build this into something I need to get paid. Whereas, what eventually motivated me to start my coaching business was that when I found out when I started helping people and coaching people with and in creatives included, which is what, got us connected to each other initially, there's just such fulfillment there, and I can get paid, right? I can create a business out of this and help fellow creatives with things like mindset, marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels good, and I feel like that's a good thing to market without having to compromise, feeling like, oh no, I have to, make things happen. So I love what you're saying here in terms of there is balance, and you really have to figure out, as I mentioned, that why, right? Like, am I creating this art for this business? Am I creating this art for myself? And some people are good to continue, hustling and grinding and trying to make it work. For me, I was like, no, I'm good. I don't need to sit on the floor of a theater, of a professional theater, for hours and hours and hours to get my 16 bars of singing in there and wait to hear back. I'm good you know just doing community theater. So I think there's a lot of food for thought, and everything you brought up in terms of, okay, do I want to pursue this as a business? I think that's fantastic. And I love that folks like you, right? You mentioned the nitty gritty, the boring stuff, but listen, we need this stuff. We need the nitty gritty. You mentioned the need for data driven decisions, right? Without folks like you who crunch the numbers and be like, oh, hey, what happened? As you mentioned before, what happened? You can make those strategic decisions on how to move forward and what's working and what's not, because it can get hard, as you mentioned, to be like, oh no, this one person said my cake looks weird. But there are like 50 other people that love the cake and are willing to pay me for the cake. So it's definitely a lot. It's definitely a journey. And as you mentioned, it takes some experimentation and some maybe some failures along the way to get you to that point. You spoke to it. I can definitely attest for it. What you see isn't what is it? I have a friend who says, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 31 or whatever, right? Like, we're all in our own stories and journeys here. So anyway, that's just a long-winded way of me saying that I'm picking up what you're putting down, Cady, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Absolutely. And honestly, being a business owner is a scary thing because you have to take risks. Being a creative
Yeah.
is a scary thing because you have to take risks. You have
Mm,
to let yourself fail. You have to, if you want to try a new art piece, you have to put it out there and see what happens. And even if it's a total flop, you need to do it again with another piece because you'll
mm,
never know what is your masterpiece. And I mean, for art or music or like anything that you could put out there for people to see. And that's so scary because what if they hate it?
yeah.
But
Yeah.
just because they hate the one thing doesn't mean they're going to hate the next thing. And so that is the hardest thing. And that's the hardest thing. Like, it's the hardest thing to teach people that. Like, that's something
Mm,
you really have to deal with internally. Like for me as well, like I'm terrified of failure. And I had a really hard time. Like for me, like one of my things is social media. I'm very scared of it because I'm very scared of putting out my thoughts and my opinions and everybody going, I hate that. I hate you.
mm,
And I know that's so hard for me. It's so hard for everyone. And it's just,
yeah.
it's got to be so hard for creatives as well to be like, I put 10 hours into this. But keep doing it, just please, because there are people who really want that piece of work that you may have not met them yet. You may have not reached out to them yet. And they'll be very appreciative. I do not want to say how much I spent on Etsy, because because I find one particular piece. Like, for example, I just bought a dice set. There's a million dice sets, a million of them.
Oh, yes, there are.
But there was one specific dice set that the D20, the 20 said yeet, and the one had a curse word.
Oh, I've seen those dice. I know which one
And
you're
you know
talking
what?
about.
Those were more expensive than the other die because the vendor who was selling it was from another country, which means I need to pay like $20 or $30
Shipping. Yeah.
and I did it because that was exactly what I was looking for and exactly what I wanted. So please don't give up.
Oh, man.
You're going to me.
Catalina just commented saying entirely. Yep, here you go. She says that she spends entirely too much time on Etsy as well. I feel like that yes, the Etsy tunnel is so real. And yeah, speaking of dice, I mean, I mentioned before we recorded this that I appreciate your comment on Gen Con. One of the seminars I had was with my good friend Erica at Mercury Dice and just talking through her process, right? Because as you mentioned, there it's like a risk. I don't even want to say sandwich. It's like a risk tower, like multiple risk, right? There's the business owner risk on top of the creative risk, and then it's a trifecta, right? Because then there's our whole like risk, our inner, and this is the stuff that I work on, this limiting belief block of like risk and fear of failure and rejection and all that stuff that comes up, especially if we're putting ourselves out there, as you mentioned, on Etsy, on social media. It's scary. We're vulnerable out here on multiple levels. But you know what? We love it. And so that's why we're going to keep on keeping on and putting ourselves out there and continuing to do this work. It's just at the end of the day, we need more art, and the way that we can continue being profitable from this art is with you. And you mentioned your fear of social media. Well, sister, I do a lot of work in that realm, so I'm going to say it out here right now in the universe. Feel free to reach out and we can collab as needed, because I think that's part of it too. It doesn't have to be so isolating, right? That when you're creative and you're trying to work through ideas, partnering with folks like you for the bookkeeping, with folks like me with coaching and or marketing expertise, right? Finding folks that can support you on your journey as a creative and as you're working to build profit from that passion. It takes a tribe, man. It takes a village. Right? You gotta get your party, right? And then you gotta roll your D20. I don't know. I was trying to make it work with a D&D reference. I don't know, that might have failed. Yeah. So well, wonderful. Where can our friends find you? You mentioned being shy on social media, but I want all the people to find you, follow you, get you confident, say how much they love your awesome work, so that we can get it rocking and rolling and have more people work with you, because we need you.
So people can find me on almost any platform, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook at the Bookkeeping Pegasus,
Okay.
a username there. And then on my website, pegasusbk.com. And every time I say how that's spelled, I'm always like pegasusburgerking.com. For bookkeeping, I always say BK's and Burger King.
Yeah, we love us some Burger King. But one thing before we go, what's the inspiration behind the name? Obviously, Pegasus is a mythical creature. Is that where that came from, or is there something about Pegasus that you really enjoy? I'm just curious.
So when I was making my business name, I aspired to have an element of fantasy in every part of my life. Even though
Love
accounting
it.
is supposed to be like a very professional, very neat type of field, my wedding was fantasy themed. I'm very, very into fantasy themed things.
I love it. You mentioned elves, and I was like, yes, this is my people. I am so here for it. Yeah.
And so I actually was like searching, and I was like trying different names. Like I tried Chimera Bookkeeping. I was like, I'm going to make a fantasy creature as part of my name. I also looked into like gods and goddesses, but that's like very overused. Lots of Athena bookkeeping type of thing.
Yeah,
And
makes sense.
so, but a Pegasus, when I was also looking up like what are these mythical creatures, what do they stand for before like I chose one. And a Pegasus, because of its wings, stands for reaching your dreams and reaching your goals. And that's
Oh,
what
I
I'm
love that.
do, whether it's the startup creative that's trying to figure out how to run a business, how to what it means to make financial decisions like a business owner, to okay, I have either a huge following, or I actually have a brick and mortar business and now I want to open different franchises and that kind of thing. So I'm actually focused on how do I grow now that I'm past like the beginning startup phase. I want to be there for all of that. And I want to absolutely eradicate the idea of the starving artist. The starving artist mindset does not need to exist, and we do not need to be telling more creatives that that's exactly what's going to happen to you if you choose. You don't need to. Oh, you need to work on IT or accounting to make money. Throw that passion aside. It's no. How do we do this strategically so that you can make this your business?
Oh my goodness. Wow, what a beautiful note to end on, Cady. Thank you so much for that. Yes, let us reframe. Amen. Yes, Kathleen. Amen. Like, let's get rid of this starving artist mentality. No more. No, thank you. Yeah, we should get paid for what we're worth. Our work is valuable, and it should be it you should be compensated as such. You don't have to go in, as you mentioned, these more technical fields if that's not what you fancy. And so, yes, friends, please reach out to Cady. As she mentioned, go find her, the Bookkeeping Pegasus, on all the social media channels. Pegasus Burger King, pegasusbk.com. I'll add all those links in the comments and the show notes. Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you may be one of our longest guests, because usually this is about 30 minutes or so, but I've just really loved what you were sharing, that we went a little bit longer, and I think that's totally okay. So, next time, speaking of, putting yourselves out there and finding your passion, next week we're going to have Mia Bradford coming to talk to us about taking the leap of faith from corporate to entrepreneurship. So, the similar vein, if you're looking to take the leap and jump out of that corporate job and into the small business ventures that Cady and I talked about today, please join us next week, same time, same place. But until then, take care and keep on creating, because we need more artists just like you. Thanks so much, everyone, and see you next time. Bye.